Hello, good evening. My name's Aaron Bastani, and welcome to a very special show. Tonight we have a Q&A, a question and answers session to celebrate the fact that we've added more than 4,000 new supporters in little more than a month. We started a new fundraiser, like I said, I think about 6 weeks ago now. We had 6,000 supporters at the start of that. Our target was 10,000 supporters. We made it. So to everybody that contributed, to everybody who supported us even before the fundraiser, of course, thank you. Our work wouldn't be possible without you. To celebrate that tonight, like I say, we're doing a question and answer with Michael Walker and Ash Sarkar. Michael, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Aaron. What wonderful circumstances to be joining you this evening. Thank you so much to everyone who made this fundraiser a success, going from 6,000 to 10,000. I can't do percentages in my head, but that seems like quite the jump.
Yeah, well, we're close to doubling it, right? We are quite close to doubling it. I mean, if we carried on for another month, who knows? Ash, how are you doing?
Well, I'm deeply disappointed because I was told that the celebration was going to be cocaine and champagne at the Spectator Garden Party. And instead of discussing great replacement theory with Fraser Nelson, here I am with you guys. Guess that's fine.
I'll try and put on a very strange accent, which nobody can quite comprehend. So maybe that's the best we're going to get in terms of somebody like Fraser Nelson. Just to say, Ash is wearing a Novara Media t-shirt, as am I. We'll plug that later on. But if you like what you see, go to shop.novaramedia.com. First question. The Curly Wonder asks, this is several questions in one, but it's one question generally. Can you tell us a bit about the origin story of Novara Media? What was the catalyst for founding it? How did some of your key members like Ash and Michael join? I think our most valuable players, our MVPs, are Ash and Michael. And did most of you already know each other beforehand? It's strange for the host to answer the question, but I feel like I have to probably answer the first bit, and then I'm going to throw the other questions over to you, if that's okay. Right? So Curly Wonder, perfect. Can you tell us a bit about the origin story of Novara Media? So I was involved in the student movement in 2010. I just started a PhD, as was Ash, as was Michael. We didn't know each other at this point. And we were involved in the movement against the threefold increase in tuition fees. You've, of course, got the new austerity government. It was really clear by the beginning of 2011, after that movement failed, because, of course, tuition fees were increased, that there was going to be a massive attack on public services, that younger generations weren't going to enjoy the kind of affluence and opportunities previous generations had enjoyed. We were really right about lots of things, actually. It was quite clear, I think, already then that British politics had changed forever. And we recognized that media wasn't really going to represent that story effectively. And it wasn't going to demur from the official narrative, which was austerity is necessary, that it's good, capitalism works, we don't need to change anything. You've, of course, had the global financial crisis a few years earlier. We all thought that was the end of an era. In fact, things got even worse. And so for me personally, I was involved in activism, and I was doing a PhD, like I said. And strangely enough, this is something I don't think I've ever said before, but I used to work out in a gym in UCL. And I had a friend there, a guy called Joe Casman Todd, who was a jazz musician. And he said, well, you're relatively lucid. It might not seem like it now here on YouTube with a microphone, but I was relatively lucid back then. He said, you're relatively lucid. You're really passionate about this stuff. Why don't you ask for a radio show on Resonance FM, which is a London radio station. It has a FM frequency. It's available, in car radios for like a really big area. Millions of people can access it through FM as well as DAB. So I said, why not? So I met Richard Thomas, who was the head of programming at Resonance. He said, well, do a weekly show. We tried the weekly show. And within a couple of months, James Butler came on board. He became a co-host. And obviously, because our analysis was right, things weren't working politically. We needed a mass movement in opposition to that. And we needed a media to do that too. More and more people kind of gravitated towards the project. Our now creative director, Patrick, I met in a Mark's reading group. He built a website. Then we asked somebody else, well, do you want to write articles? Then other people get in touch through social media and say, well, do you want to make videos? And before you know it, by around 2015, We have a website. We want to make podcasts, articles, videos. And then Jeremy Corbyn becomes leader of the Labour Party. So we recognize something important is happening. There's a shift in politics. Of course, that's compounded with Brexit and Trump the year after. And this is actually a really relevant, pertinent project. But it was very, what's the word? Maybe Ash can tell me. She's the English graduate. It was very fortuitous. It was very circumstantial that it was going to happen at all. Novara Media wouldn't exist without Richard Thomas and Joe Casman-Todd. So you can thank them. I'll throw this over to you two, because I think I kind of answered the what was the catalyst for founding it. How did some of your key members like Ash and Michael join? So let's start with you, Ash. How did you join Novara Media?
Okay, so I met Aaron during the student movement at the UCL occupation, where we're all staying on this like horrible cold floor. And because I was working in a pub at the time and I was used to counting cash, I put myself in charge of like looking after the cash donations. And so there was this loose ceiling tile, and I was like, okay, when we're asleep, that's where I'm going to hide the money. So you move the ceiling tile, you put it up in the ceiling, and I couldn't reach by myself. You had to like stand on a sink to like dislodge the tile. And Aaron was the poor soul that I looped into like shifting the tile. So that's how we met and became friends. And initially, when Novara Media was going on and Aaron and James were hosting their regular resonant shows, I was just a listener like anybody else. And I found it a really valuable resource because it was the left that I recognized and was a part of doing its thinking in public and thinking about having conversations outside of the immediate political networks and friendship groups. And so I thought that that was quite valuable. And then in 2015, it was during the Baltimore uprisings after the killing of Freddie Gray, I believe it was, that I did my first ever Novara FM. And it was because it was an issue which I felt really, really strongly about. The death of Freddie Gray obviously mimicked so many other deaths following police contact of unarmed Black men in the United States. And there were also a lot of resonances, I felt, with the kinds of police violence that we'd been seeing in London. Just 4 years before had been the London riots following the killing of Mark Duggan by Metropolitan Police. It wasn't that long afterwards, you had the shooting of Jermaine Baker, and also the killing of Ian Tomlinson. And that for me really stood out just because of the brazenness. It was literally on camera. A police officer struck him with a baton from behind. He sadly died at the G20 protests, and this officer was acquitted of manslaughter. And for me, that issue of police violence was really politicizing. So Aaron and James invited me to participate in this show. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it, whatever. How hard can it be? And then I got really nervous before. And I remember phoning Aaron going like, I don't want to do it anymore. And he was like, you are fucking coming down to the studio, come hell or high water. I do not care. And then, yeah, I've been part of it ever since. And I think maybe the thing I'll always be grateful for is that I would never have considered working in the media at all had it not been for Aaron and James being incredibly encouraging. I would never have done it. I'd probably still be working at the pub being a really grumpy barmaid. So yeah, thank you very much. Would have never have known that this was possible.
Yeah, I remember that first show you did with us, and you obviously had misgivings. You weren't sure. And I said, just do it. And I think you were speaking for about 15, 20 seconds. James or I opened the show, and it's live radio. It's not easy. And you spoke and you were incredibly lucid and fluent. And my jaw kind of dropped, and I just sort of, nudged James. I went, this girl, what a kidder. Who's she bullshitting? She's a natural. She's really extraordinary. She's got a really original thinker, amazing communicator, very funny. It's obviously very rare that you get all three of those things in one person. So we're very lucky to have you, Ash. Michael, how did you get involved in Novara Media?
First of all, just the story that you tell there, Ash, always makes you think, Aaron, you're a very impressive person, founded Novara Media. You've got a brilliant book, very popular, one of the best communicators I can think of when you just put a camera in front of them. One of your biggest achievements, though, is scouting Ash Sarkar. That's quite an achievement.
Happy to say it.
Stop talking, both of you.
This is a celebration stream. We're allowed to do this kind of thing. So how did I get involved? I got involved a bit later. I wasn't lucky enough to know you two guys during the student movement. I was actually occupying buildings with James Butler back in 2010. Then after the student movement, I had a bit of a sort of identity crisis because I was very much like a paid up anarchist at the time, and kind of like black bloc anarchist, masks, cap, everything. And then sort of by the end of that movement, I was a bit like, wow, that's kind of a weird politics, isn't it? And it's not that attractive to people. And I was sort of like, oh, I'm not going to do politics at all. I went and worked in a secondary school in South London for a year, and then worked in a secondary school in Madrid for a year. And one of my realizations was working in a school is really goddamn difficult. I don't know if I can do this. And my other realization was that actually I was still really interested in politics. And one of the things that got me back involved, especially, was I was in Spain at the same time that Podemos were getting quite big, and they had a TV show called La Tuerca and then called Fort Apache, which was how I kind of learned Spanish. Really, I've forgotten it now, unfortunately. If you don't practice, it falls away. I regret to inform you. But I was super impressed to get there. One, you had Podemos who were sort of talking about radical left politics in this language that people understood. It no longer felt like a kind of marginal and, sometimes self-indulgent idea, to get involved in left politics. Successful, they looked close to government at some point in time. And I was really impressed with their show La Tuerca and Fort Apache, which was people talking about Gramsci, and you had 25,000, 50,000 views on YouTube. And I was like, this is incredible. I can't believe there are this many people watching something which is talking about really left-wing ideas. And so my thought at the time was that the UK needs something along those lines. That was something that was going to be sort of somewhat in the future, in the back of my mind. I was going to stay there for an extra year. But then Jeremy Corbyn got elected leader of the Labour Party, and I was like, well, what am I doing here? My Spanish isn't particularly good. I can go to Podemos meetings, but I can't really get involved. I'm not an asset to this movement in any way or form, because I can only understand every 4 out of 5 words, and it takes me a very long time to construct sentences in Spanish. So I was like, I'm going to go back to Britain and get stuck in. And then with some friends, in particular, Lewis Bassett, who now hosts a podcast, The Full English, you should check it out. And Joe Lee, very impressive academic. We'd written for Novara a couple of articles about Greece, which was sort of the other big formative experience at the time, Syriza taking power. Another thing that made the radical left seem like, oh, this is really relevant. This can impact politics in a fundamental way that affects lots of people. So anyway, cut the long story short, I come back to Britain. With my friends, we decide we want to make something along the lines of that show, and we pitch it to Novara. Obviously, I already knew James Butler. We met everyone else through that process. And if you want to see those original shows, if you want to see me much more wooden than I now am on camera, being absolutely terrified to read an introduction, they are still on YouTube. It's called The Fix. I struggle to watch them now. I can't watch them because I am so wooden. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I was so nervous. But you can see how far we've come. But yeah, joining Novara, the best thing I've ever done. I couldn't be among a sort of more warm, supportive, talented team. And I'm super glad that now we're becoming a proper big sustainable organization with 10,000 supporters. So thank you guys. And thank you everyone who's made this fundraiser a success.
When Michael joined doing The Fix, I showed my mum because I was like, look, we've built this set. Like, it's incredible. And my mum was like, not sure about the set. Looks like a shipping container, but that new host is very handsome. So you got the Mama Sarkar seal of approval from very early on.
Stop it.
That's the most important thing, isn't it? Yeah. This is from Barney HS on YouTube. They've given us a super chat. Thank you, Barney HS. They ask, Snog, marry, pie, Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, Keir Starmer. This is over to you, Ash. Snog, marry, pie, Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, Keir Starmer.
Snog, marry, pie. All right. Snog Liz Truss, and I'll tell you why. She just looks like a bit of a freak. Like, I think that she's someone who, if she wasn't a Tory and you just met her at an after party, she'd be there giving you hallucinogenics that you've never even heard of before. So I think Snog Liz Truss, marry Rishi Sunak because he's incredibly rich. He's incredibly rich. And just imagine what I could do for the left with all of that money. And then pie Keir Starmer, because there is nothing more worthy of disdain for me than someone who has claimed to have done all this really amazing radical stuff. I was legal observing for, the whopping Prince strike. I was a human rights lawyer, to then kowtow, not just to the establishment to the extent that he did, but also to things which are really fucking indefensible. Thinking about the overseas operations bill, the policing bill, the way in which he's rolled over on all of those massive civil liberties and human rights issues, I think he deserves a pie in the face for that. But what about you guys? Snog, marry, pie. Keir Starmer, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak.
I'll throw this one over to you, Michael. Go on.
You've got three people you don't really want to marry. Who do you marry? The richest one, so Rishi Sunak. It just makes obvious sense. We're gonna be the same, aren't we? I feel like I should try and mix it up, but also I would snog Liz Truss because she seems, she's batshit. But I've snogged a few batshit people in my time. Why stop now? Keir Starmer's just not giving. I don't really want to pie the guy. I don't really want to marry the guy or snog the guy. But of the three things, I'd probably pie the guy for similar reasons that you suggested, Ash.
Yeah,
I mean, what about you, Aaron? You're going to have to switch it up.
You need to switch it up. Yeah.
No. I think that's really spot on. I think if you married Rishi, I think he'd be quite easy to get on with, right? You just do his thing. He goes to California. Like you just chill out, right? You could be a person of leisure. I think Liz Truss kind of maybe could be fun, interesting. Keir Starmer. I mean, again, like you say, Michael, it's no. Well, I do have ill will towards him, but not to the extent that I want to pie him of all the political figures in the UK. But I mean, that's the game we're playing. Yeah, he gets the pie, I'm afraid. This is a really great question. I'm going to throw over to both of you, and actually, this is a really, really useful question for some of our audience. So this is for both of you. I'll start with you though, Ash. This is from Joe Jones. Sorry, Joe. Any advice for young journalists wanting to fight back against bias in establishment media in the UK? So that's from Joe Jones. Ash.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I think that's a really good question. I think there's lots of ways to do it. I think the way in which you're not going to do it, quite frankly, is by becoming a lobby journalist. So if what you want to do is be a counterweight to the kind of obsequious court stenography that we see from the lobby, it's unlikely you're going to be able to do it within the kind of framework of establishment political reporting that we've got now. There are some, I think, exemptions to that rule. I think Adam Bienkov does some really good work over at Byline Times. But generally, if you've got a lobby pass, you're not going to be an effective counterweight. So then your options are, I think, kind of hard reporting, news gathering, or you sort of try your luck doing some opinion work. I think of the two, actually developing some really strong, left-wing perspectives within news gathering and reporting, I think is the thing which is most needed. There's a lot of opinion out there. There's often not a lot of news gathering. So that would be where I'd almost say, focus your energies. And it doesn't have to be, of course, like with a newspaper. There's some really incredible documentary work which is being done by people from the left, and I think that there are spaces for that. Many of which aren't based in the UK actually, to sort of do that work. I think actually Al Jazeera's documentary work has been tremendously useful, really, really important. There was this fabulous documentary series called Orphans of the Sahara, which was about the Tuaregs, but the final episode, the final installment, really looked at French uranium mining and connected it all the way to the invasion of Mali in 2014. And so that's the kind of thing which, you don't really get a lot of space to explore in the UK media. Of course, the last bit of advice I'd give is apply for a job with Novara Media. We're looking to nurture new talent, young talent. Really proud of how the articles team has developed, particularly in this past year. So we've made some really incredible hires, of course, Simon Childs, but also we've hired a Labour movement correspondent because we want to take trade union organising as seriously as we want to take Westminster politics or, economics. So yeah, I'm really proud of the work we're doing. So apply for a job. Can't hurt. I don't know. What about you, Michael? What do you think? You of course took huge amount of initiative with setting up the Fix and then Tisky Sour. So I'm really interested to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, it's always a difficult question because it is, lots of these things are, good luck to some degree. I feel incredibly lucky, sort of the position I managed to find myself in. I know lots of people who go and do the journalism masters. That seems to be pretty useful. I mean, you probably have to go into 10 grand debt to do it, which is always a challenge, a shame about that. I suppose a general thing to say, though, and this isn't a step-by-step guide of how to get a job in the media, but it is really the case that practice makes perfect. So I'm not a particularly good writer, but I know that writers say what you've got to do is just write all the time. Start a Substack, even if there's only 10 people reading it, because that's how you get in a position where you've got interesting things to say and you can communicate them well. And my job, obviously, speaking to camera, I used to find that so difficult, so like freezing up, so awkward, very, very difficult to have a sort of fluid conversation while doing it because you're so nervous. And the reason now I feel so confident talking to a camera is because, I've done it every week and now 3 times a week for years. And as I've already explained, I was lucky enough to come into an organization that already had reach. So those initial shows were getting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 viewers. Obviously, if you're starting from scratch, that's going to be harder. But it was going over and over again through that model, constantly sort of changing the setup until we got to a product that we were sort of really, really happy with. Obviously, doing this all as a team. And then it's now that I feel like, Tysky Sour has really exploded, and that's because of those sort of 7 years that went previously. So I think whatever you want to do, start doing it. Don't worry if you're not perfect now. Don't worry if when you read your article, you're thinking, this is not as good as, how do these people who I read and follow, how do they sound so confident? How do they write so fluidly? It's probably because they've been doing it for a very long time. So if you can find any way to start doing that, even if it's only 10 people, 100 people, you'll be lucky if you get to that 1,000 people, even if it's not many people reading or watching it, it's a benefit because those people are enjoying it, but also because you are getting practice in the field that you want to be in, doing the, I sound pretentious now, doing the art, the medium that you want to be involved in.
I think I'm going to feedback, I think, a few things just to echo what you guys have already said. So the first is I think learning by doing is hugely important. As Michael has said, I think you get much better at broadcast journalism, you get much better at writing, much better at copy editing just by doing it. And that's not to diminish academic learning, but learning by doing is hugely important. I think just getting out there and doing something and not worrying about whether or not it's perfect is, again, hugely important. There's the kind of cliche of ready, fire, aim. So get going, start the podcast or start writing or whatever it is you're doing, and then iterate and improve it over time rather than trying to line up all the ducks. And 6 months down the line, when it's perfect, we'll get it out there and it'll see the world. That generally doesn't work. If you're a huge media company, of course, you have a hard launch of a new product and everything has to be perfect. But if it's somebody starting a YouTube channel or a podcast or a blog, then I think the opposite is true. I was talking to Hassan Piker last week. We've got an interview coming out soon. The very first Twitch stream he did had 30 viewers. So if you've got 30 viewers or 30 listeners or 30 readers, don't worry about it. And then I think finally, with regards to journalism as an industry in particular, do not worry about credentials. Do not worry about this person is, the big shot of this particular media group, because the next 20, 30 years in the media landscape, as with many others, is going to be marked by disruptive technologies, constant change, and authority is not going to be based upon, well, this person writes at this outlet, therefore they're the authority. The authority is going to be based upon your reputation. And you can build a superb reputation within housing journalism or within trade union reporting, or you might want to do hyper-local journalism. You might want to start a newsletter about your city. And you can build authority and credibility off the back of doing that. And in 6 months, you can be hugely knowledgeable about a particular area and you can make it your beat. So that would be my thing, is make something your beat, get really passionate about it, learn lots about it. And that counts for a lot more than, well, so-and-so did an internship somewhere. Honest to God, it doesn't matter. When we look at CVs as well, what matters most is what you've done. So if we have a CV from somebody that's great degree, master's degree, PhD, I have we've all been academics, or we've, done masters. We've all done master's degrees, all three of us. Doesn't matter. If that person has started a YouTube channel, it's got 100,000 supporters, or they've made a video with 500,000 views, that is something that really grabs your attention. So I think that would be my final piece of advice. Next question. This is from Chris Travis with a huge super chat of £50. Thank you, Chris. This will be directed towards Ash. So Ash, this is a bit of a longer question. What 3 demands should the UK left be pushing? Feels like the US left has a really clear set of policy demands, which helps them with messaging. Really agree with that final point, by the way. So what 3 demands should the UK left be pushing, Ash?
Okay, one is, I think, housing for everybody. And the reason why I say housing is because you ask an older Tory voter in the Shires and a young BAME working class person from Tottenham, do you think house prices are too high? Do you think it's too hard for people to find secure housing? They'll both say yes. And the asset escalator and how unequal it is in this country, I think goes to the heart of how the economy is structured. That if you've got enough money to get on the asset escalator and it just keeps going up, you're fine. If you're somebody who can only live off the money which is generated from their labor, you're not fine. So I think housing for everybody, publicly controlled housing stock, totally critical. Second thing, unsurprisingly, is going to be, for me, Green New Deal. And there's lots of ways in which you can phrase it. Some people prefer the phrasing of Green Industrial Revolution, but for me, this does 2 things. One is that it puts at the highest possible priority the single biggest issue facing us as a species, which is climate change. And climate catastrophe is a reality in the present day. The effects are unevenly distributed. So the kind of famines you're seeing in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, the total pulverization of Yemen, which some people have said, has its origins as a climate change story before it's one of the, joint Saudi UAE coalition. You've got what's going on in Bangladesh, but come on, Essex, Kent, those are all on fire in, the first time we've ever seen 40 degrees centigrade heat in this country. The effects are here. So Green New Deal's got to be part of that story, because also then you start thinking about an economy which isn't about, okay, how do we generate profit for, a very, very narrow group of oligarchs, but how can the state have a role in directing the economy so we're producing things for the social good, the global good, the public good, and not just because, if we focus on these particular financialized assets, these kind of, speculative parts of the economy, then this line goes up. No, you're actually producing things of value. And then the third thing, and I kind of wonder what you guys are going to think about this, is drug decriminalization. I think drug decriminalization is one of the single biggest things you can do to change how policing operates in this country. I also think that it's something which is it can be a bipartisan issue, particularly when you look at the polling on decriminalization of cannabis. And I think that is an issue which, when you talk to younger people who aren't particularly political in how they would self-identify, you start saying, okay, what about drugs decrim? Like, aren't you sick of being stopped and searched? Or, do you think it's right that, you can go to the corner shop, buy a bottle of vodka, but you can't smoke your weed in peace? Lots of people go, yeah, no, that is really unfair. And of course, the drugs industry has got huge international dimensions. The war on drugs was a pretext, effectively, for the US to start throwing its weight around Latin America and rewriting constitutions left, right, and center. So it's got these, huge international dimensions as well. But I think that it's a domestic policy issue which can really bring new people into the fold. So housing, Green New Deal, drugs decrim, those are my 3.
Michael, quickly, what are your 3?
I think there would be lots of crossover. I definitely agree with all of those 3 points. Any regular viewers of Tisky Sow will know I'm obsessed with how much rent is and how sort of unjust, and how everyone can see the injustice of you having to give 40% of your income to someone who has done absolutely nothing. It's like feudalism again. Can't stand it. So I would put that in there. I mean, it's got really, really broad appeal. I mean, obviously you need the climate in there, and Ash has explained very, very persuasively why. I think potentially as a third one, and I agree with drug decriminalization for a variety of reasons, personal and political, but I would I do think something that's missing in politics since Jeremy Corbyn went, and especially actually since the 2017 election, which I think was the high point of this, is the importance of taxing the rich as a political demand. Because it is what sets the left apart from the right on so many issues. We all want a properly funded NHS. We all want properly funded schools, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, we should be demanding that. We should be demanding that very, very strongly. But the way you sort of show that is not just an issue of technocracy, but it's an issue of injustice and inequality and class struggle, as you say, this is going to be paid for by taxing the rich. And we do not tax the rich enough in this country. And so I do think that's such an important dividing line, which was incredibly effective when Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party. It actually became common sense that, of course, we should tax the rich more, right? And now, unfortunately, because Keir Starmer's being advised by Peter Mandelson, they want to drop any idea that taxing the rich is important whatsoever. All they talk about is tax up or is tax down, when what we should be talking about is taxing the rich people, right? Tax wealth, tax high incomes. I don't really care. Obviously I do care that this is more of a technocratic issue. What we should be shouting about, though, is inequality is too high. Some people have too much wealth. They don't deserve that much wealth. No one is 1,000 times more important than anyone else who's working at the living wage. And so we should be taxing them more. I do think that is just this big gaping hole in British political discourse right now.
Two great answers. I mean, I'd quickly say for me, housing, pay, high streets. And I think, environment and climate change, you can link into that. I'll quickly say on high streets. The power of high streets for me is people say, well, Britain is booming. The economy is doing fantastically well. There's opportunity and prosperity. Go walk down the local high street. Now, unless you live in maybe 5% of the country, often it looks like a scene from 28 Days Later, or, something from a survivalist manual about what to do in a post-apocalyptic world. For me, high streets is great because it just gets through all of the media and political class bullshit about how well things are going. And actually, they're not. High streets that consist of bookmakers and kebab shops. I've got no issue with kebab shops, but that's generally what a lot of high streets look like, and little else, and lots of empties. That is not, I think, the hallmark of a healthy society. Michael Brogan asks, now this is for you, Michael. Of the two numpties left in the Tory race, which would be the worst choice for the country? So that's Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak. Who would be worse for the country?
Well, as we talk, there's a short-term and a long-term answer. So in the short term, I think Liz Truss would be worse for the country because her priority is to cut taxes. That would be incredibly untargeted. The corporation tax cuts, which she sort of suggested she'd want, would massively benefit the wealthy. I think that will make the country more unequal. And also, given that Keir Starmer's in opposition, I think he's going to be disinclined to raise them if he does win. The big worry of Liz Truss, though, is she'll start some nuclear war. She doesn't seem like someone who's particularly careful. The upside of Liz Truss is obviously that I think if she becomes Prime Minister, Labour will win the next general election. And while I'm no big fan of Keir Starmer, obviously I would much prefer any Labour government to a Conservative one. Especially because our public services are really crippling. It's just incredibly sad to see how the NHS especially just completely collapsing at the seams. Like, it is vandalism what this government have done over 12 years to this country's health service. I feel for the people who work in it, who are being worked so hard in such an impossible situation. I feel sorry for, we all need to use it, but the people who need to use it incredibly often, for example. Yeah, if Liz Truss gets elected, I think we get a Labour government. That's a good thing. The danger, though, is if she starts a nuclear war between now and then. I think Rishi Sunak is essentially going to be more of the same of what we've had so far.
Right. Before we go any further, I've been told to say that right now, if you head to shop.novaramedia.com, we're running 10% off for 10 days to celebrate getting to 10,000 supporters. Very memorable. So that is a reduction on all of our merch that runs through to midnight on July the 30th. That's at shop.novaramedia.com. This T-shirt's no longer there. Ash's T-shirt is there. It's all fantastic. It's trade union labour. The printers are cooperative. It's organic cotton, high labour standards in terms of manufacture. So very ethical stuff. Already, I think, very cheap for what it is. Of course, you're helping support us, but it's even cheaper temporarily until midnight on July the 30th. That's shop.novaramedia.com. This is a question for Ash. Pacha Mama asks, Who is the best dancer at Novara Media?
Oh, who's the best dancer? Okay, everyone actually can fucking shake a leg. And that is why I'm so proud to be a part of this organization. And everyone's got their own, like, kind of, the quintessentially them dance move. So, like, Aaron does this thing, which is like a cross between, like, I'm at a rave, but also an Iranian wedding. So there's kind of this, like, gun fingers and shoulders, but, like, with a distinctly Middle Eastern twist. Michael dances in a way which is like you kind of angle your head down and are like, who's checking me out? I'm just gonna subtly suss it out like either side of my shoulder. And like I mean, like, look, man, like if I looked like you, I'd be doing that too. But I think in terms of just like straight up, like, wow, sensual, look how smooth those hips are, it's gotta be Dahlia. Like Dahlia is so much fun to dance with. And one time we were dancing together. I think it was like James Butler had a party. He lives on a boat. And because it's on the Thames, it moves a lot with the tidal water. So everyone was either stone cold sober or totally pissed because you can't judge how drunk you are when you're on a boat that's kind of like rocking and rolling a bit. And so everyone was looking kind of like green and nauseous, but then trying to like dance through it. And then Dahlia was just like in a music video, like giving it like the full like Normani. So everyone can dance, but Dahlia is my number one. I don't know if anyone else is gonna like contest this.
You would have been my
I'm not
number
gonna
one,
weigh in on-
Ash.
I'm not going to wait on the
You've gotta
dancing
say that, though.
question. My what stands out in my memory is Patrick, our head of design's rendition of Thong Song at our Christmas karaoke, which was in a Korean restaurant in South London. It was incredible. I was blown away. I was transfixed. So if you ever do get the chance, get Patrick Best to do the Thong Song at karaoke.
Maybe when we get to 100,000 supporters per month, well, that's when we release the video.
I remember he was always this mysterious figure who I'd never met for probably my first 2 years in the organization. It's this Patrick guy who runs the website who I've never met or heard of. But the first time he appeared on a Skype call, I was like, oof. Talking of people in Novara being somewhat good looking, he's dishy. We need to get him in front of the camera at some point.
He's a married man, but maybe that's not stopped you before, Michael. I don't know.
That's why I'm always looking around when I'm dancing.
Yeah. It should be added. I think he had about a liter of soju before that song was kicking in. So one to remember. This is from Al Still. This is for you, Michael, from Al Still or AI Still. I think it's Al Still. And this is a really great question. It's something I talk to you about very often, Michael. When will we see Michael Walker on mainstream telly? Ash is brilliant at it. Michael, what happened? You went on like several times. You were great. You don't go on anymore.
I don't get asked anymore. I didn't have. Well, they used to ask me because they needed someone to talk about the left-wing perspective. People from the left was all of a sudden relevant. So that this was someone who was on the Corbyn wing of the Labour Party. The Corbyn wing of the Labour Party was relevant enough to invite me on. And I didn't. Ash obviously is such a superstar. She doesn't need Jeremy Corbyn to be leader of the Labour Party. I was at his coattails, but I don't really mind because I actually think that focusing on Tizki Sauer and focusing on Novara Media has just, it's actually much more rewarding. It means you can talk about exactly what you want. It means we can build this fantastic audience. We don't have to be relying on other people. So I love watching Ash Sarkar speak to these right-wing idiots on Channel 5 and Sky. Moya does it as well, also excellently. But I don't really miss it, even though, it's kind of fun. But if you are watching and you're a producer at a major network, I am available other than between 7 and 8 p.m. on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
I think one of the reasons why it didn't end after Corbyn is that they're always looking to balance a panel by gender as well. And I think that if you are speaking from a politically marginalized perspective, like you are on the left and you're a feminist and you're an anti-racist and all the rest of it, you're being squeezed out. And then one thing that can kind of get you back in that little bit more is if a producer goes, shit, there's like 5 white dudes, we're going to need to at least like make some kind of nod to balance. Because while producers aren't very embarrassed about having very politically homogenous panel discussions, and indeed very racially homogenous panel discussions. To be honest, they are very, very embarrassed by not having, either a gender balance or, when they have an all-female panel, they get very, very pleased with themselves. They're like, "Look, Mum, I've done a feminism." So I think that just on the basis of like being a woman on the left, while obviously there are unique difficulties in terms of the kind of very gendered and, in my case, racialized criticism, abuse that you get off the back of it, you are further up the list of people that producers are going to call because they'll go, shit, we need a woman.
Yeah, there's something to that, but also the reason you could break out beyond Jeremy Corbyn is because you are hilarious. Like you're so funny. Like if I was a producer, I would, I suppose in some ways I am a producer. I have locked you on once a week, but if I was a producer on any other channel, regardless of the political discussion, there are a few people I know who can talk about left-wing politics or any kind of politics in the way that you do, and then at the same time be really funny. That's what I'm always most jealous of you about, Ash, is the way that you can just slip a joke into everything.
But the thing is, the thing that like everyone has to remember is that these people are fucking ridiculous. Like, I'm not just talking about politically they're ridiculous people or, the things they say on the panel. In the green room, they are incapable of behaving like normal human beings. And I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago, the day that Boris Johnson resigned, I was doing Newsnight, and I was literally the only person who wasn't a Tory supporting journalist, a Tory MP, or a Tory member of the House of Lords who was on the show for that Newsnight. And so I cycled from the Bermondsey studio, arrived at that new broadcasting house. That was the first thing which people thought was bizarre. So I entered the green room and they were like, "You rode a bike? You didn't take a taxi?" Like they just looked totally like cracked out by it. And then I was sitting there in this room and it was like Ed Vaizey and Peter Bottomley and Camilla Tominey, and it's very cagey because they want to have this kind of explicit conversation about who they think is going to win, who they're going to back, but they know that there is someone from the left in the room. And then there is this weird non-small talk where they are talking about politics but not quite, and I found it really boring. So I started talking to one of the producers about Love Island because that was the Casa Amor recoupling, and so I was like, "Oh my god, can you believe Tasha and Andrew?" And then they were all looking at me like I'd grown a second head because I was having a normal conversation, just like a normal conversation like a human being would have. And then the other thing which like these people find really weird is if you're not I remember the first time I ever did a BBC thing, someone came up to me and said, "What school did you go to?" And I didn't know what that question meant at the time. So I was like, "Oh my God, I went to Enfield County and it was an all-girls comprehensive and it had this like really interesting ethos," and like watched them switch off because it obviously wasn't a school like they meant a school. So yeah, like the reason why I think it's easy to just sort of say the thing that you genuinely want to say, and sometimes that's making a joke, and sometimes that's saying something at someone's expense, or sometimes it is just sort of like losing your temper a bit. It's because the only way you have respect for these people is if you're invested in this highly artificial world, this totally insane pony show that is Westminster-based political media. And I actually think that if you start taking the whole thing super duper seriously, it means that you have developed that investment and you have been co-opted to a certain extent. You take the politics seriously. You take communicating something valuable to an audience seriously. But these people are fucking circus clowns. You do not need to take them seriously, in my opinion.
We're going to move on to the next question. I just want to quickly say, I think the reason why I probably do less TV than before is I quite literally said to people on radio and TV that they were fucking idiots, and there does come a point, it was particularly during the anti-Semitism stuff. No, but during the Panorama thing, I was going on BBC Radio and they'd be saying this, and this. And, I posted a clip yesterday and they said, well, this person said that Labour's anti-Semitic. Well, I said, there's one person out of a party of 500,000 people. That's not how we come to conclusions scientifically. But you were dealing with hysterical, low information nonsense. And you do it so well, Ash. Moya does it so well. I think I'm a bit like Michael. You know what? You're good at it. These people just wind me up. Screw them. I think there is a good argument that we should all do it to obviously expand Novara's reach. But fortunately, we have excellent people at this. Next question. John O'Boyle on Super Chat says, congrats on reaching 10K. I am one of the 10K supporters. Thank you, John O'Boyle. Listened to the Ben tapes last week and forgot how great they are. Could you recommend any similarly great political diaries? That's for you, Michael. Quickly for both of you, because we'll maybe stick around for another 25 minutes. Any great political diaries, Michael Walker?
The secret here is anyone you see in front of the camera at Novara Media, I am the worst read of all of them. I'm not sure I've ever read a political diary. I'm ashamed to say.
Yeah, I mean, I find them really boring, to be honest. I mean, I read a couple of the new Labour ones. So I read, I think it was a Harriet Harman one, and I also think that I read, shit, I can't even remember. I can't even remember if it was Damien McBride or Alistair Campbell at this point. But to be honest, like, they're kind of interesting. Sometimes it gives you a bit of an insight into particularly the New Labour project, just how like venal and corrupt and, spectacularly unambitious it was in some ways. But I don't necessarily think of political diary as something which is a super valuable thing to read. I mean, in terms of like the closest thing to a diary, which I think was really valuable, like, the prison notebooks, those are great. Read those, but it's not really a Westminster diary, is it? Aaron?
Yeah, I have. I feel like I have a good one here, which is Raphael Samuel's "The Lost World of British Communism," and this is about sort of pre-war, post-war British Communist Party, which they had an MP. They had a huge turnout actually in the 1945 election. They were critical in terms of shifting Britain's political position around opposition to the Third Reich. They were right in terms of what was going to happen next around the time of the Munich Agreement and so on and so forth. And then you see that going into the 50s, the 60s, and kind of falling apart by the 70s. So, yeah, The Lost World of British Communism by Raphael Samuels. Very, very highly recommended. Yeah, sorry, I'm not a fan of those kind of identikit Westminster diary. They all have like the diaries of like, Michael Heseltine and Margaret Thatcher. It's like, come on, man, read a proper book. Like, you're reading books by it's like it's not true about the London Review of Books. I like the London Review of Books, but there's that great joke about the London Review of each other's books, and that's often how it feels with Westminster. It's just like it's all people who buy each other's books and memoirs and diaries. It's like Michael Gove bought Cameron's diaries, and Cameron will buy Michael Gove. Read some new books anyway. Imagination Scene with £10. Will you guys get more local reporters doing videos in the north, say? I live in an area that is quite underdeveloped and no one does any good reporting here. It would be useful for you to say, Imagination Scene, where you live. Ash, will we be getting more local reporters doing videos in the north?
Well, yeah. So I don't want to sort of make the idea public before we've like actually fully mapped it out as an organization. So what I will say is that thinking about how we develop capacity outside of London, become less London centric, and have people who are based elsewhere in the country and also possibly different countries as well. That's a really, really high priority for us. Moya is actually someone who's been taking a real lead on this internally and has come up with some, I think, really great ideas on how we might be able to do that. And I think in the meantime, when we're still working out like how we're going to do this and how we're going to action it, I guess the thing that I would say to people is like, please, please, please do pitch to us. So we've been putting out requests for writers from backgrounds which aren't that well represented. And that's not just race, that's not just gender, that is also class, and there is also geography, it is also all of these other metrics which don't get their fair amount of representation in the media. So please pitch to us. We're always on the lookout for new articles writers, new reporters, and also like if there's someone with a really shit hot idea, it doesn't really matter what the strategy is that we've agreed, we're going to probably find a way to make it work if it's something that's really good.
Yeah, so true. Michael, anything quickly to add to that? Because you're the Tisky guy in terms of local reporting on video over the next 6 months.
Yeah, we would like to do it. It is we keep wondering whether we should do something where we get people to send in their tapes, because obviously it's kind of easier to find people from how they tweet and from what they write. It's difficult to know without meeting someone if they're going to be, super great on camera. So watch this space. I think we might try and do a thing where we get people to send in their tapes so we can get some more faces on Tisky Sour. But obviously this is a conversation and we have a lot in the organization and one of our priorities. We have always been quite a London-based organization because it grew out of London. Most of us live in London. The studio's in London. But as we grow out as an organization, as we get bigger, more professional, more well funded. That is, one of the key things we talk about the most when we have those big picture meetings.
Yeah, I think we need to get on top of Labour reporting in the next sort of 2-3 months, which we're starting to do. And then I think once we're doing that, totally outside of London, local reporting. So much is going on, nobody reports on it. In really big places like the West Midlands, it doesn't really register in the national conversation. We will rectify that. Next question from James Maxwell Mwangola. Hope I said that correctly. What's the best and worst thing about working at Novara Media? So that's to you, Michael, from James. What's the best and worst thing about working at Novara Media?
So the best thing is, almost everything for me about working at Novara Media is really good. I love my colleagues. I love my job, which is basically to talk about what I find interesting. If I don't know enough about the thing, then I get an expert to speak to about it. I get to speak to Ash, Dahlia, and Aaron every week for an hour on YouTube. Read your comments. It's really lovely bumping into people as well in the world who watch Tizki Sao. We have a conversation. That's really nice. So the positives definitely outweigh the cons. I'd say probably the main con is Twitter. And I say that because on Twitter, I have a tendency of still tweeting like I have 1,000 followers. So for me, I don't really find Twitter very interesting as a way of sort of like, this is my position and now I'm going to argue it. For me, Twitter is for brain farts. It's for like questions. It's for sort of like, oh, what do you think about this idea? But because I'm, an organization that, people, rightly think has stature and I've got all of these followers, people are like, I can't believe you said that on Twitter. I was like, I said that in the morning. I just woken up, like, relax. But so I can't be held responsible for anything I do while I'm still in bed.
Don't take me seriously in the morning.
Yeah. Or often like late at night, and then you go to late at night, like, oh, I wonder what people think about that. Tweet. And then you wake up in the morning like, oh God. So I tweet a lot less than I used to because that just removes a lot of the cons and I get to keep all the pros.
Ash, best and worst things?
Oh, okay. So just to repeat it, that obviously the best thing about working at Novara is that I'm surrounded by people who are super smart and also really, really values led. And that doesn't mean that we all agree on absolutely everything. And there's actually, like, whenever the three of us have done a show together, getting into the political differences is always something which I really relish doing and I really enjoy. But we're values led in the sense that I don't think anyone's in this because they want to be an insider in some way, right? Don't think that anyone's here because they want to be, at the left wing equivalent of a spectator garden party and they want to be cozying up to powerful people. Everyone's here because ultimately we've got a really sincere belief that power needs to be shifted away from capital and towards labor, that we need a world which is based on justice and peace and security for everybody and not on war, extraction, profit, the imposition of borders, racism, gender-based oppression, the marginalization of indigenous people, LGBT people, so on and so on. We're really values-led in that way. And when you're surrounded by that every day, particularly when you're working in a media space, it feels so nourishing because I can do something where I don't know, like just had to talk to like Mike Parry or like, been on Good Morning Britain. And then I come into the studio and I'm like, oh, this feels like a balm. It feels like a balm after you're in the space and you're like, wait, who's crazy, me or you? So yeah, the people, absolutely the best thing. Look, the only bad things about working at Novara come from when you come up against the limitations of resources. So you might have a really good idea and you just can't make it work, or there just isn't the capacity in terms of human time. And that's where, doing a fundraiser like this, where instead of going, okay, we need X amount more money, we're like, no, okay, we need to, nearly double our supporter base. And it's going to allow us to do so much more. It grows our audience, but it also just physically, financially allows us to do different kinds of work. That's why it's so important. Because anything that's like chaotic within the organization or when tempers get frayed, it's because you've got too few people working too hard. So that's why I'm so happy with how this fundraiser has gone and why I'm so deeply appreciative of our audience. I'm just going to add that as a third thing of like a really amazing thing about working for Novara, because like I said, my colleagues I find so politically valuable, but the audience I find so politically valuable as well. Reading the comments, seeing the engagement, watching the way in which there is this dialogue that's always going on between us and our supporters. It's not just a one-way thing where we go, here's your content, we're taking the money, okay, goodbye. It's this ongoing conversation, which I find so politically valuable and nourishing. And there are times when the audience will say something and I'll go, oh my God, I haven't thought about it like that. Or, oh yeah, that totally escaped my attention. Or like, you know what, I was thinking about it like this. And actually, I think I agree it's like this. So sometimes it's like the audience is like another colleague that's in the room. And I love that. I love that about Novara. What about you, Aaron?
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think it's a great job. There's not another job I'd rather do, I think. There's no downsides. I actually, with the social media stuff, Michael had sort of mentioned it. I think I've got to a point now, as you get older, you sort of care less about these things. But now I actually I look at hate stuff and I scroll through it at night to relax. It's really strange. And I sort of go to sleep with a smile on my face because I'm so idiots. Because, let them do their thing, we'll do our thing. But that's kind of where you end up. It's like, we're doing our thing. It's moderately successful. We have a certain perspective which we want to persuade people about in terms of doing things differently in society. If you disagree, fine. What nutty thing are you saying today? What waste of your time? I actually literally find that a way of relaxing. Go on.
Aaron, we're going to need to get your actual wife on the stream now to talk about whether or not she approves of hate comments in bed, like as a way of going to sleep.
Oh no, she kicks me out. No, she kicks me out. She kicks me out. She decides she'll be wide awake, and then she literally is like, right, that's it. I'm going to sleep. Leave. Okay, fine. Okay. So then I have to sort of go into the bedroom, and that's when I'm scrolling, and she's a big sleeper, a big sleep person. Again, another thing is you get older, you sort of get quite precious about it, I think. I don't, but people do apparently. So no downsides.
You don't need to be precious about sleep to hit someone out, to kick someone out of the room who's, giggling and taking these deep, relaxed breaths as they read all their hate tweets.
Oh no! Just to clarify, I'm not one of those people. No, I'm not one of those people. We'll be watching something on Netflix or whatever, and then she'll just say, "Right, I'm going to sleep," because she just gets tired like that. Right. So,
okay,
I'm not one of these people that's like, rinsing Ian Dunt at midnight, and when my wife's next to me, I'm not. Fortunately, I'm not that sad. Fortunately, I'm not that sad. Not yet. I mean, it might happen. I do that afterwards. I do that 10 minutes later. I go into the other room and I was giggling to myself. She's like, "What are you laughing at? Shut up." But, I'm not quite that sad. This is from Ellis Fox. Again, let's be a little bit quick. So we've been going for an hour. I mean, it's great. We're getting all these super chats. We keep on getting these super chats, and it's good to talk, I guess. So let's aim for maybe another 20 minutes if you guys don't mind. I mean, Fox isn't shouting down my ear, so I mean, I don't mind. But Fox is the sort of he's a very stern quartermaster. Ellis Fox on Super Chat asks, "Do you ever get worried about committing your views to the stone tablets of the internet? I'm starting to publish, and I'm fairly self-conscious about it. Ash, should he be should she, he, they, Ellis Fox be self-conscious about committing their views, the stone tablets of the internet?"
I mean, look, I think that there's two ways of looking at the internet, and one is looking at it as a stone tablet where everything that you've ever thought or written can be thrown back in your face. And I think the other is the way that Michael was talking about it as an arena for experimentation. And I think that that's kind of the healthier thing to do because, sure, we do live in a social media climate which is full of this you or, people looking for an opportunity to dunk on somebody else. But it's also an opportunity for unparalleled creativity and access for information. And unless you look at that as an opportunity for play and experimentation and sort of seeing how your thinking develops through the writing of it, I think it's just, such a wasted resource, such a wasted opportunity. So it's totally natural, I think, to be anxious about that. But I mean, don't be. is my answer is don't be. Take writing seriously. Take publishing seriously. You don't want to turn into somebody who's just like, yeah, I'll write any old fucking thing. But use it as an opportunity for experimentation. I think I find writing really enjoyable, and I actually find tweeting enjoyable because it's taught me brevity. and condensing things down, because before that I was, I'd gone to university and I'd come out with that horrible habit of going 50 semicolons in this one paragraph. Why not? Why use one clause when I can add another 15 in there? And Twitter really helped me for that. So yeah, I approach it playfully, I would say.
Twitter account is the new degree. Michael, have you got anything to say, or?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with exactly what Ash has said. I mean, my position is very much that social media should be way more exploratory, and writing and all these things should be way more exploratory. I think like people who are incredibly confident in their views and sort of use social media as a means to sort of like police other people who have different views, I find it a little bit odd. Often people disagree with me in Twitter or all of these platforms in really good faith. Often I change my mind. So, I'm not saying anyone who disagrees with me on Twitter, they're trying to police me. I think there are lots of very useful conversations that happen there. I suppose one thing, but I do think people take it too seriously, and I think people should, I wish it was more socially acceptable to just put brain farts at 11 at night or 8 in the morning and then go back to sleep a bit and then wake up and, whatever. But I suppose the thing I would add is I actually feel like I'm in a very privileged position on this count, because I've got a job at Novara Media where I know that, we have a lot of freedom in what we can say and what we can do. Obviously, if any of us were, racist or incredibly discriminatory online, there would be some repercussions. But anything within the bounds of non-discriminatory views or whatever, I feel very free that I can tweet that, I can say that. It might get some aggressive quote tweets, but it's not going to damage my career. But it is the case that lots of people in lots of jobs, you do worry that something you say that's perfectly reasonable from my perspective, could get used against you. So while I wish we were in a world where everyone could tweet incredibly openly, and we'd accept that people can disagree, that actually disagreeing can be good and we can get somewhere through disagreement. I can see why not everyone can be as relaxed on social media as I am, because not everyone has as great a boss as I do. I mean, we don't really have bosses, but as great an employer as I do, let's say.
I mean, Michael's idea of the perfect tweet is that Britney Spears one from like 2011, where she says, "Does anyone think global warming might be a good thing? I like Lady Gaga. She's a really interesting artist."
I love that. That's what we should all aspire to. But if I tweeted that, people would complain. That would get a lot of quote tweets. That's injustice.
In terms of what this person's asking, it's going to be, committed to eternity. Two things. So if you are going to have a certain beat, which is like local reporting or tech journalism or whatever, if you've got authority and you're in a certain area and you build credibility with a certain group of people and you're just seen as somebody who's open to strong arguments and open-minded, I think you'll probably be okay. I think if you're going into areas of reporting or comment which you're not really aware of or familiar, and you come up with a really strong, conclusion, and you've not necessarily examined it, people are going to come for you, often not in a nice way, but also you've not really helped yourself. So I would say what I said earlier, which is commit to a certain area, have a certain amount of expertise and credibility. Then secondly, this isn't going to be around forever. I mean, people like to think, the internet's, it's going to be around forever. MySpace, try and find somebody's MySpace account now. It's very, very difficult. It's very likely, this is actually an issue, I think, in terms of the historical archive. 30, 40 years' time, we're not really going to have all these tweets, probably. Maybe that's not a bad thing. So in a way, yes, stuff is archived more than ever before, but it's something I've been thinking about since publishing a book. That book and the arguments in it, people will be able to, if they want to, I mean, I'm not suggesting they will, but people will be able to read and engage with that in 200, 300 years' time, because books are a very, very sturdy medium. They last for a really long time. Tweets, YouTube videos, we don't know. We don't really know how long that sticks around. What kind of technology, if we move to Web3, I'm not saying we will, to what extent will this even still be relevant media? So, the jury's out in terms of that stuff being there for the rest of eternity. Felon on Super Chat says, on a lighter celebratory note, which song do each of you find it hardest not to dance or groove to? So, Michael, which song can you not dance to?
I dance to most songs. Like every time I go to the co-op, whatever tunes they're playing, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And then I sort of catch myself like, any old shit that was released in the 90s while I look at the refrigerated section. I get some funny looks. So I danced to everything. The last song probably I listened to that I was dancing around the house to was the most recent Beyonce, You Won't Break My Soul. Very, very good tune. Very fun to dance to. But yeah, it's too easy for me. It's too easy for me. You don't even have to write a particularly good song. I will dance to it. The Novara, the Tusky Sour theme tune. Sometimes Fox is like, stop moving your head. I'm like, Go on, Ash.
I'll dance. I'm like Michael. I'll dance to anything, and I fucking love dancing as well. I think for me, at the moment, the songs which I just like keep playing again and again to dance to, Beyonce "Break My Soul," fucking love it, and it's because it's got the sample from "Show Me Love," and that's why it's just so like addictive, right? There's some pretty sturdy dance DNA going through that song. The other things I've been like repeating again and again is this song called "Afraid to Feel," which sort of starts as like kind of like a funky disco song, and then like the BPM like speeds up. And I find that really, really fun. And then the third one is, you know, that Serrani song, No Games, Michael. I just feel like Michael's the one who might know it.
Varsity was
I love
that,
it.
was that
and, like,
song?
Yeah, it's the one which is like, no games.
Yeah. You're the
Yeah,
only one who can make me change.
Yeah. Baby, just say it straight. I was like with some friends, and someone put it on like in a car, and it was just that kind of moment of like pure elation where you're in a car with your friends and you're driving along this country road at night, and this like song is blaring out the speakers. And since then, every party that I've been to, I've like made it my business to like hijack the aux cord and be like, no games, pal. So recommend that one.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the song that I can't not dance to. I mean, if one thing that sort of I still listen to it in the gym and it's quite funny is, you know, L'amour toujours by Gigi D'Agostino. It's like 2006 Italo disco, like crazy pop music, and it's just for some reason it's stuck in my head from when I was like 22 years old and just going crazy. So yeah, that's what happens as you get old. You stop listening to anything that's sort of made in the last 5 years. That's not true. I do that. I just don't dance to it. Again, maybe that's just part of getting old. We have a few more questions. One is a super chat from Ism with a £4.49 super chat. They ask, I'll throw this over to you, Michael, first. If you had a vote in the Scottish independence referendum, which way would you go and why? Congrats on the 10K. So, Michael, which way would you vote in a prospective second referendum on Scottish independence?
It's a very interesting question. I think emotionally, I would go for independence. You know, I like it when big dramatic things happen in politics. You know, and I think that would be a good one. I mean, I think Scotland does have a more progressive electorate than Britain does, so I can see why you would probably be more likely to get strong social democratic governments. There are some big practical problems. What are you going to do about the currency? What are you going to do about the border? I think I would actually be someone who was genuinely persuaded by the campaign on either side when it came to that question. Because I don't know. I do think there are some big questions that the people for independence haven't answered, but emotionally I get it. And I can also see why you wouldn't necessarily want to be part of the UK. So yeah, I'm going to sit on the fence. I'm going to wait for the arguments. Hopefully, I do hope another referendum happens. I think that's, you know, democratically, obviously the just thing to happen. They want to have one, give them one. But yeah, I will hold my judgment as to how I would vote.
Ash?
If I was living in Scotland, I would vote independence, because why would you want to remain yoked to England, which keeps delivering Tory government after Tory government, has an outlook and also an insularity which would feel very antithetical to the way in which I considered myself and my politics. I think that, yeah, if I was in Scotland, it would be a no-brainer. I would vote independence. But I'm not in Scotland, I'm in England. So I'm looking at this from the perspective of a progressive electorate looking at a hacksaw going, should I cut myself off from, you know, the sinking ship of England? Well, some of us are on the sinking ship. So I'm like, please, baby, don't go. I can change. So yeah, in England, I'm like, no, please stay. But if I was in Scotland, obviously I would vote for independence.
Yeah, I think my default here is probably like you two. I mean, I like drama. So like, if I was Scottish, we're like, yeah, let's just do it. Fuck it. Let's just be independent. But I do go with what Michael's saying, which is I think on pensions and on currency, it's really, really, really difficult. And my instinct would be to leave. And I think I would have to be persuaded that those were sufficiently bad that, you couldn't do it. I think Evo Max would probably be the most sort of appealing. I think you could get massive sort of support for that. I think if I was Welsh, again, I'd probably have your own country. I mean, they are their own nations. So the question is, should they be their own nation states? I mean, there's no overwhelming cultural argument against them being nations. That's something I definitely don't buy. Oh, we're the United Kingdom, we're a family. It's not. This is anti-nationalist arguments. Well, you're making a British nationalist argument against a Scottish nationalist argument. This is silly. But yeah, I think that on the technicalities, I think that's true. It would be great, wouldn't it? I think independence got to be great. And I think you're right, Ash. You look at somewhere like Ireland, has its own problems, hyper-financialized economy, et cetera, but you look at what it's been able to do away from the rest of the UK. You compare the Republic to Northern Ireland in terms of, and I know it's not the whole world, and I know it's deeply unequal, but on GDP, productivity, it's been able to create a different kind of model. And I think if you're in Scotland, you're probably looking at Sweden, Denmark, Finland, thinking, well, if we wanted to be, we could be more like those than like England. And I think that's probably correct. This is the last question from Willem Harrison Barraclough on Super Chat. Asks, and I'll pose this to you first, Ash. What would a Keir Starmer government mean for the left, particularly within the Labour Party? Would it expand opportunities or suffocate them?
I think that's a really interesting question. I would say, what do you mean by the left? I think if you're talking about the left of the Labour Party, it would try and suffocate opportunities. Now, that depends entirely on what the size of the majority is. If there's a stonking majority or, being propped up by the Liberal Democrats and Keir Starmer doesn't have to listen to rebels within his own party, then, yeah, I think that would be a suffocating political settlement for the parliamentary left. However, if there's a narrow enough majority and you still have campaign group MPs sitting in Parliament, then yeah, they would kind of have him over a barrel and have a degree of leverage in terms of trying to hold his government to a left-wing policy platform. And I think that's why you're seeing so much energy being focused on deselecting left-wing MPs, whether that's Sam Tarry or Afsana Begum. There's a reason why they're coming under such attack from their own party at this point. Keir Starmer's going, okay, what if I have a very, very slim majority? In terms of the extra parliamentary left, the movement left, the trade union left, that's only as weak as your organising, really. So, of course, with the Labour government, there's a danger that people just go, okay, well, job's done. I can go back to being a political spectator. But you didn't necessarily see that happening under Tony Blair's government. You, of course, had a huge anti-war movement. You had, I think, a relatively depressed movement when it came to economic issues. You didn't have a massive renewal of trade union organising necessarily. You didn't necessarily have like a huge housing movement. You did have some really interesting kind of anarcho and horizontalist movements going on at that time. But yeah, I don't think that it was a sort of death knell for the extra parliamentary left, being under a Tony Blair government. And the thing I will say is that after such a long time of austerity, now followed by inflation, if Keir Starmer doesn't deal with the fact that people have been punished for the economic sins of the ruling class, then I don't think that there would be a material basis for people to go, okay, job's done, I'm just going to stay at home. No, I think you could, in those circumstances, have a very lively left, which is pushing Keir Starmer's government. But I don't know, what do you think, Michael?
I mean, I think you're right. I'm generally of a fairly optimistic disposition, so maybe that's clouding my judgment. But I do think if Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, the left would have, a lot to do, essentially. Ash is exactly right. I don't think Keir Starmer is going to win a stomping majority. He's not an inspiring guy. I think he definitely could win a majority or become Prime Minister via a minority government, especially as seems likely the Tories elect Liz Truss. So I think a Prime Minister Keir Starmer, very, very possible. I think if he does win, it would, I think those socialist campaign groups, so long as they can cling on, and there is a really vicious attempt now within the party to, by completely unscrupulous methods, deselect them. Obviously, you'll remember when anyone tried to deselect anyone, even when they triggered Diana Johnson, do you remember that was a huge national crisis? This was a scandal, front pages. This was one of the big talking points on the radio. They've just done that to Sam Tarry. Now, no one cares, right? It's mind-boggling how much pressure there was on a left-led Labour leadership not to threaten a single MP, and now when the party machine quite systematically try and pick off any left-wing MP, complete silence. Bizarre. But so long as people, some left-wing MPs can remain, and that will require a lot of organisation. Hopefully, we'll also have some, inspiring left-wing MPs like Faiza Shaheen. Her selection is this weekend in Chingford and Wood Green. I know also, again, the party massively organising to keep her out. Clearly, she would be one of the most talented and inspiring people in Parliament. And you've got the shadow Foreign Secretary and the shadow Health Secretary. All the MPs around have clubbed together to join this campaign to stop Faiza Shaheen. So embarrassing. But probably the reason they are doing that is because they know that if they were to enter government, then those left-wing MPs would have a fair degree of influence, especially if they've got charismatic leaders. So people like Faiza Shaheen or Zara Sultana. In terms of the extra parliamentary left, I again think that will have a lot of influence, and more so than it did in the Tony Blair years, because you got to think right now it is way more the case, I think, that there is a huge section of the population who are completely locked out of the benefits of growth. I mean, growth is, not happening anyway, but the minimal growth that is happening, you've got all of these people locked out of the housing market. I think you've got a huge section of society with expectations which are not in any way being met by the Conservatives or what the Labour Party are offering. And so I do think there will be a force that becomes quite difficult to ignore for any Labour government, especially as they have no direction. What do they want to do? They've got to do something. So if there are extra parliamentary movements asking them to do something reasonably left-wing, what else are they going to do? I suppose they'll just listen to whatever the civil servants want or whatever the Murdoch press wants. But I think there will be quite a lot to play for.
Quickly going to respond to that. And again, really important insights. I think I don't like Starmer. I don't trust him. I think Labour, even irrelevant of Starmer, is a fundamentally bent, corrupt organisation. However, I do think that if he does become the Prime Minister, whether that's a majority or a minority government, more likely with a majority because, of course, you have a mandate, I do think they would probably repeal quite a lot of anti-trade union legislation. They've been very clear on that. Even now, Starmer's clear on that. The GMB, Unison, these are trade unions which have been very supportive of Starmer. They are big stakeholders in that project, and I think they would really insist on that. So I think you would see a change for the better on trade union legislation. I don't think it's impossible. You would even have public ownership of rail. I think probably how it would be executed might be bad, but I can see it. And then I think basically on everything else he promised, don't even bother. And I think the fact that he's talking so openly now about my number one priority is growth, nothing else, focusing on that, and of course it's been low growth for 15 years, that's fine, talk about it. But saying I will monomaniacally focus on growth and nothing else, I think is a license to not really have a policy agenda, fundamentally. He's saying we need to get the economy growing. I would simply grow the economy. Great. How? Quite funny for a gentleman who was doing economics for dummies with Charlie Faulkner and Ed Miliband. But still, that's what he's saying he would do as Prime Minister. So those are positive things. And I would also say that all of the shortcomings, and like I say, Labour is a bent, corrupt party full of very vicious, horrible people. All of those shortcomings would be under a huge magnifying glass if they were in power. And I think things could go very badly wrong, very badly quickly. And you would need a coalition behind that Labour government for it to be able to do anything, let alone left policies. So it'll certainly be interesting. I think one of the things that we've learned over the last couple of years is just predictions are a dangerous thing to do. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn looks odds-on favourite to be Prime Minister in mid-2018. Within 16 months, the whole thing falls apart. Boris Johnson had an 80-seat majority. We were looking at an Attlee-style or Thatcher-style project of complete political reconfiguration after 2019. Didn't happen. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Brexit was overturned in some way in 10, 15 years, which I thought impossible a year ago, 18 months ago. I question the sort of political smartness of doing that now and going on that, but I don't think it's impossible. So, there's so much is up for grabs. I agree with both of you guys. I don't believe that Keir Starmer can be pushed from his left, because I think he has completely bad intentions and ill will towards his left. But I think fundamentally the policies are so popular, the challenges are so big that if he is in power, I think he'd be playing a very dangerous and short-sighted game if he did alienate his left decisively. He might do. Who knows? Really useful insights from both of you guys. Ash, Michael, thanks for joining us here on this Q&A this evening. Thanks to everyone who gave us their super chats. Do you guys want to say anything before we leave?
Just a massive thank you, both for you for hosting, Aaron, and for everyone who got us to that 10,000. We are so appreciative and incredibly excited about what we can do next with the organization.
Just thank you to everyone who signed up to become a monthly supporter. Thank you to everyone who shared our crowdfunder as well. We couldn't be here unless we had a movement of people who really believe that things can be better right behind us, supporting us every step of the way. So thank you. There would be no Novara without you.
Well said, Ash. We will be back tomorrow with Michael Walker and myself on Tysky Sour. You've been watching our one-off Novara Media 10,000 supporters Q&A. Thank you again to everybody who supported us. If you haven't already, we are at novaramedia.com/support. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.